Well, here we are on the last day of July, and things are certainly heating up. You may be seeing it in the news, or you may not, with the Olympics on and everything else going on in the world. But I want to highlight for you what we're hearing from our partners on the ground, those in the Israel Defense Force and those leading ministry efforts right now amidst the crisis, about what's happened in the last few days, even in the last 24 hours, in the land of Israel, what's happening in the Middle East region around the land of Israel, and what Jewish people in the Olympics and wherever else they are in the world are experiencing in increasing measure. And I want to tie all of that together so that you can join us here at Jewish Voice in praying more fervently and more specifically than ever. Your prayers are critically needed right now. So what's happened in Israel? Well, there continue to be sirens going off in the north of Israel, right on the border with Lebanon, as Hezbollah continues to threaten major advanced weaponry warfare against Jewish people living in Israel on the northern border. So we have a two-front crisis right now, going on three fronts, more on that in a minute, with the ongoing situation in Gaza with Hamas, who has pledged itself to the destruction of the Jewish people if and when they have the opportunity. And then the increasingly intense threats of war even with Hezbollah and the northern border. And as I'm sure you heard, a number of children were killed in the Golan Heights by a rocket over the weekend. And you know what? They weren't even Jewish children. They were Druze children. The Druze community are really a tribal people who has lived in and around the land of Israel for hundreds, if not thousands of years alongside the Jewish people. They're not enemies of the Jewish state. They're also not Jewish, but they're living in the land of Israel. And children in a soccer field were indiscriminately killed by a missile. So I want you to understand that the attack on Israel is directed to Jewish people, but the attack is indiscriminate. What else has happened in the last 24 hours alone? Well, the second in command of Hezbollah was killed at the hands of special operations Israeli initiatives and forces in Beirut, in the capital of Lebanon. So this is new. As you may know, that the conflict has been really on the border of Israel, between the very northern region of Israel and the very southern region of Lebanon. It's been a localized conflict. But now there's been an assassination at the hands of Israel of the second in command of Hezbollah in Beirut, in the capital of Lebanon. So this is now uncharted waters. Hezbollah, of course, has immediately said, we're going to retaliate. They're not saying when and they're not saying how, but they're saying we will go to war with Israel. It's inevitable. And I want to remind you that Hezbollah, as we shared recently, by its own charter document, is a proxy for the nation of Iran, for the Ayatollah's vengeance against Jewish people and the Jewish state. So Hezbollah is not making its own decisions. They're taking orders from Iran. And then as you may be hearing, you may not even have heard, but we want to be some of the first to share with you, last night, U.S. time, the second in command of Hamas, Hania is his family name, was killed not in Gaza, but in Tehran, where he was celebrating a holiday. He was killed overnight. Again, Israel is taking responsibility for that assassination. And you may be asking, what right does Israel have to assassinate the second in command of these groups? And I want to remind you, folks, these are terrorist regimes. We can't say it enough, and we're going to continue to say it unapologetically. Go online. Look in the history books, look at the charter documents, the reasons for existing of Hezbollah, which means the people of Allah, and Hamas, which means resistance. In Hebrew, it means violence. Their charter documents obligate them, whenever they have the opportunity, to kill Jewish people and to attempt to eliminate the Jewish state. And they're trying to do just that. And that's why Israel has taken it upon itself, and again, the Israel Defense Force, defending the land and the people of Israel, in Israel and then wherever there are Jewish people around the world. The IDF has taken it upon itself to eliminate these men who are really the ringleaders, the orchestrators of these atrocious crimes and plots against the Jewish people and the Jewish state. But of course, we understand it's not going to be without retribution. And Iran now has said, we will not stand for the assassination of the second in command of Hamas on our land, and we're going to retaliate. So you have Hezbollah, who's a proxy for Iran, pledging they're going to take action militarily against Israel. And you have the leadership of Iran itself saying, we're going to retaliate for the assassination of the Hamas commander in our land. Things are heating up. It's not, I'm sorry to say, getting easier. It's not getting less complex. And the war and the conflict in the region is not cooling down. It's heating up. The stakes are higher than ever. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, how is this affecting Jewish people around the world? Well, we need only look to the Olympic city of Paris to see that. If you haven't seen it online, let me tell you right now, daily there are increasing numbers of death threats against Israeli athletes competing in the games. Israeli athletes are going to shake the hands of their opponents before a fair competition. And those opponents who are from Muslim states are refusing to shake their hand, and they're shouting in stadiums and arenas, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So I want you to see, folks, that religious fanaticism has now, for the first time in modern history, trumped international diplomacy and sportsmanship. That's what's going on. And in an increasing measure, with increasing specificity and hatred and violence, that religious zeal on the part of fanatic Muslims and the radical Islamic community is directed toward not just Israelis, but Jewish people wherever they are. So how can you pray? First of all, pray for the preparation of the state of Israel and its military forces to stand against and to protect innocent human life, Jewish and Arab, living in Israel. Remember, there's millions of Arabs living in Israel, millions of whom carry Israeli passports. They're full Israeli citizens. So the preparation and wisdom for the Israeli leadership to respond in a way that protects innocent human life and minimizes casualties, as we see the inevitability, really, though we don't know the time frame, of a conflict with Hezbollah and the ongoing crisis in Gaza. So pray for peace and protection in the land of Israel and preparation for the military conflict to come. I also want to ask you, brothers and sisters in the Lord, to pray for the protection of Jewish people. Specifically, in the next couple weeks, pray for the protection of the Israeli athletes who, again, literally and specifically by their name, their lives have been threatened as a retaliatory act for what's happening 1,000 miles away in the Middle East. And would you also pray for the protection and the preservation of Jewish people right here in the United States, those living in Europe and Ukraine in harm's way, those living in South America where there's increasing threats against them, and wherever there are Jewish people, including scattered Jewish communities all over the world. We here at Jewish Voice are committed not only to sharing the good news of our Messiah, Jesus, Yeshua, with Jewish people whenever we have opportunity, but also being a voice to advocate for and to stand up for Jewish people when they're in harm's way, when they're vulnerable, when they're downtrodden, when they're marginalized, and even as is happening now throughout the world, when their very lives are being threatened. And I want to ask you to join us in those efforts. Would you lift up your voice at your church or congregation? Would you lift up your voice at your workplace? Would you lift up your voice even when it's uncomfortable and you know that the person sitting across from you may have an opposing viewpoint? Not to vilify Arab people, not to say all Palestinians are enemies, because they're not, but to say, I'm choosing to stand with Israel because God has made promises to that people and He's made promises to bring them back to the land, and I'm choosing to agree with the Lord. So I'm praying for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm praying for the peace and protection of Jewish people wherever they are, in Israel and in the nations. I'm praying for a swift, decisive end to this conflict with minimal loss of innocent human life on either side of the issue. And most importantly, we're praying that the Lord's kingdom come and that His will is done in this crisis and elsewhere on earth as it is in heaven. We're going to keep you updated as we're in touch continually with our ministry partners on the ground. I wish I had more good news to share with you, but sometimes we have to share the difficult news so that we can activate our prayers. And I want to thank you and exhort you, keep standing with Israel. Make your choice today. It's not going to be easier tomorrow to choose to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. And keep praying, praying, praying that the Lord's purposes come to pass. He has made promises. He will step in. He will intervene to save the Jewish people. He will be exalted as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He will come again to rule over the nations of the earth from Jerusalem. It's going to be a difficult path to get there, but we're standing upon those promises, and we're not without hope. So thank you for keeping your faith up, keeping your prayers going. We'll update you as soon as we have more information.